What happened in episode 3 of House of the Dragon, second of his name? How does it relate to the book, and what does it mean for the rest of the season? On this channel we cover House of the Dragon in full, breakdowns, explanations and deep dives into the lore and history of George R.R. Martin's world, as well as other great fantasy books and TV shows. If that sounds good, then please consider clicking the subscribe button in the bottom right of your screen, and the bell icon. For the last 2 episodes of House of the Dragon, we've been treated to hints of the war in the Stepstones, a sight here and there of the crab feeder, some geopolitical mutterings about it being evidence that the triarchy of free states in Essos is not taking the Iron Throne seriously anymore, and Corlys Velaryon repeatedly emphasising how important this is to his house Velaryon and trying to push Viserys into taking action. 3 years later, this is the first of a few time jumps this season, it's clear that Viserys has still not taken any action. Instead, we have a sort of proxy war. The crab feeder is technically not working for the Triarchy, but is supported by them, and Daemon and Corlys are technically working without the approval of the Iron Throne, though Viserys has certainly not tried to stop them. It allows for a degree of deniability on both sides. Just a word on the crab feeder first, though. He is portrayed here as clearly suffering from pretty advanced grayscale. This wasn't in the book, but adds an intriguing twist to the story. For most people, grayscale is incurable and over time affects all parts of the body, which explains his peculiar jerking motions and perhaps even the fact that we never actually hear him speak. Perhaps also it has already got to his brain, explaining his rather twisted and gruesome approach to war. Anyway, the war there has reached an impasse of sorts. Crabfeeder has holed himself up on Bloodstone, the biggest of the islands, and seems content to wait it out while Daemon rages overhead on Caraxes and Corlys glowers on a nearby island. We'll leave them there for the moment, for the majority of the episode takes place in King's Landing and the Kingswood, just south of King's Landing. 3 years have passed, and although the cast of characters is largely the same, there have been some big shifts in power in King's Landing. Viserys has married Alicent, and they already have a 2-year-old son, Aegon, with another child on the way. The Velaryons are nowhere to be seen, fighting in the Stepstones or chilling out on Driftmark. Otto Hightower remains Hand of the King, and also now, of course, father-in-law to the king. Another Hightower, Hobart, has appeared on the scene, and the Lannisters make an appearance, twins Jason and Tyland Lannister. As you would expect, there is a marked shift in the dynamic between Alicent and Rhaenyra. They were best friends, and now Alicent has married Rhaenyra's dad. Rhaenyra was clearly the senior as heir to the throne. Now Alicent can pull rank by telling Rhaenyra that her father wants her to do something. All very awkward. It's a nice touch to show this shift by Rhaenyra reading in the Godswood and hearing a song about Queen Nymeria. Back in episode 1, the two of them did something very similar in the same place. It was the establishing shot to show us how close they were. And let's spare a thought for that poor minstrel, who clearly isn't sure whose orders to obey. A lot has been left unsaid, clearly, though Alicent seems a lot keener to heal the rift than Rhaenyra is. Crucially, Rhaenyra is now alone and lonely. The importance of that will come up again later. But the court is clearly swirling with gossip about 2 things, both of which are about Rhaenyra. Will the king still keep her as the heir now he has a healthy son, and now she has reached the right kind of age in their eyes? Will Rhaenyra marry, and if so, to who? Clearly the 2 issues are closely linked. Rhaenyra is very politically eligible, whatever her status, but there's a big difference between her being married to the lord of some great house, as lady of that great house, if she is no longer heir, and finding a prince consort for her as queen, if she still is heir. Viserys clearly wants Rhaenyra to marry, partly because he wants to be a granddad, and partly because a marriage would be very advantageous for the ruling family. And he clearly encourages or suggests that Jason Lannister introduce himself to her with that in mind. It's not exactly the most suave of propositions, but at least he's very clear about what he wants. What bothers Rhaenyra is not so much the fact that someone is coming on to her as the clear implication that Jason thinks he is being encouraged to approach her on the basis that she will be taken out of the line of succession. So, on marrying him, she would become just a Lady of Casterly Rock, not Queen of the Seven Kingdoms. Rhaenyra isn't stupid, and if this approach was sanctioned by her father, then it seems that her father has made up his mind about the succession and not told her, as well as seemingly setting her up with someone without talking to her about it at all. Although Viserys seems to characterize her as being willful and out of control, her choosing to ride off away from the camp at that moment for some alone time is entirely understandable, as is Criston Cole, now a member of the Kingsguard, following her. It's his job to protect her. The two bond a bit here. As we noted earlier, she doesn't really have anyone anymore, and he, as he admits, owes everything in life to her. She chose him to join the Kingsguard, despite his lack of station. Then a wild boar attacks. Criston Cole saves her life and she lets out her anger on the boar itself. When they return to camp together, it is with a shared bond and respect between them and from others for the kill. Because all this is taking place at a hunt to celebrate the new Prince Aegon's second name day, and those looking to support Aegon's claim to the throne are starting to look for ways to prompt him into the decision they think he has to make. For example, here there is a rumour of a white stag they might be able to capture on the hunt. White stags were once seen as a sign of kingship, and they are there to celebrate Aegon's name day, so perhaps this is a portent from the gods about Aegon and kingship, nudge nudge. It's not very subtle. As an aside, Rhaenyra and Criston Cole see the white stag and let it go. The Hightowers won't get their portent that Prince Aegon should be king today. Instead, Viserys is presented with a not white stag to kill. It's being held in place for him to do the deed. It can't move, he's shown where to strike, and he still takes 2 goes, shutting his eyes even. It's a pretense, he knows, that and the polite applause from the onlookers as he walks away. There's a clear contrast here between this and the boar that Rhaenyra and Criston Cole kill. The showrunners aren't really labouring this point, but it's clear who has the killer instinct here. So there are lots of people now swirling around Viserys trying to manipulate him into doing what they want, and we're starting to understand that his default position is that of a conflict avoider, not confronting Daemon about his clear insubordination, not talking to Rhaenyra about all the things they need to talk about, not doing anything about the stepstones, not shutting down talk about the succession, and now with all the politicking just getting to him, he decides to get drunk. There's a nod here, I think, to both Robert Baratheon later, who got drunk on a hunt in the Kingswood. That didn't end well for him. And also Daeron the Dreamer, a Targaryen for whom the dragon dreams were too much and he just drank to shut them all down. Anyway, here Viserys' drinking at least prompts him to face up to some home truths. He talks about that dragon dream he had back in episode 1, about his son being born with Aegon the Conqueror's crown, the splintering of shields, all the dragons roaring as one. He had assumed it was about his son Balon with Emma, who died, and he'd not had that dream again, so perhaps he'd got something wrong. That's partly why he'd named Rhaenyra his heir. Yes, to stop it from being Daemon, but also because he thought he would never remarry, so heartbroken was he. No more children, no more sons. Rhaenyra would be his only child, so heir. But now he has a son. What if he was wrong about it all? What if the dream was about this son? He's drunk, but you can see how he's agonising over it all. George R. R. Martin talked about Paddy Considine bringing a sense of tragic majesty to this role, and we're seeing it in this episode. But going forward, the important point will be that Alicent will have emerged from that conversation convinced that Viserys was, at the very least, unsure about the succession. Not that Viserys actually does anything. Otto eventually resorts to simply telling Alicent that she will need to make the king face up to the issue and name Aegon his heir, because he wouldn't be able to come to that decision on his own. What Alicent does end up doing, though, is prompting Viserys to finally support Corlys and Daemon's war against the Crabfeeder. Vaemond Velaryon, Corlys's brother, has written asking for aid, and Viserys sends it. You might think that this would be well received by Daemon. After all, they give the impression that Crabfeeder was beating them, but no, he beats the messenger who brings him the news. Why? Well, I think this is an insight into why he is there. He doesn't need to help Corlys. He's there partly perhaps to let off steam, but also to prove himself, to Viserys perhaps, or to himself. Viserys coming in after 3 years to bail out Daemon just makes him look and feel like a loser who needs his big brother's help. Remember last week when Daemon went to elaborate lengths to provoke Viserys and Rhaenyra into paying attention to him? This is more of the same. This version of Daemon is very focused on his family. He may not be able to articulate his love and need for their love and respect, but it shines through in everything he does. So Daemon goes on what could have been a suicide mission before Viserys' aid has a chance to arrive. He will do this on his own, now, without the help from his brother. He rows out under a white flag of truce, offers up his sword. Then, when Crabfeeder and his forces emerge from their cave, if Daemon is there, he can't be riding Caraxes above them, surely, he attacks. The Velaryons charge. Laenor Velaryon, who is all grown up now, rides his dragon Sea Smoke overhead, and the day is won. The Velaryons have control once more of their shipping lanes. Daemon has his grisly prize of the Crabfeeder, and he did it without his brother's help. Before we leave that scene, though, let's focus on Laenor Velaryon for a moment. Amid all the lickspittles and politicians surrounding Viserys, one of them, Lionel Strong, actually offers a sensible solution. If Rhaenyra is to marry, the best match would be Laenor. All the same logic that was there for the match between Viserys and Laena still apply. It would bring the two halves of the wider House Targaryen together and strengthen the Iron Throne. More on this next time. But we round off the episode with Rhaenyra, because this episode has all been about her in a way, whether she was there or not. She finally gets a quick heart-to-heart with her father. He tells her again that she must marry, but the context here is very different. He says she must marry to shore up her claim. And he promises her two things, that she can decide on her own match, and that no matter what, he promises this on her mother's memory, she is, and will remain, his heir. You will not be supplanted, he says. Can she believe him? She doesn't seem completely convinced, but at least they've had the conversation. And now we have a broader issue, because Rhaenyra has heard from her father that she is staying heir no matter what, but Alicent heard from Viserys that he is having doubts, and perhaps he will name Aegon as heir. Unless Viserys clears it up publicly, both will think that they are in the right. But what did I miss? What did you like most about this episode? Let me know in the comments below.